Recently, Professors Ann Jabro and David Jamison received a $2,000 grant which allowed them the opportunity to educate students on the First Amendment. The two worked to create a student-ran debate that would educate the community on the points of the amendment.
So about a month ago, probably, I got an email from our professor, Professor Jamison, and he said, we got this grant for this First Amendment project. We're going to have a series of debates about the different freedoms in the First Amendment. So basically, just if you're interested, let me know.
Professor Jabro began recruiting students to build a social media team and promote the event, while Professor Jamison selected some of his political science students to debate. Jamison allowed his students to select one of each of the 4 freedoms that come with the amendment.
The opportunity to kind of, in my own little way, argue for freedom of the press and just how vital that is to a free democratic society, I was really, really thrilled by that. That was the kind of opportunity that I didn't even know I was waiting for, but once I saw it, I was like, this is it, I gotta do this. So it wasn't even a choice for me. I was like, yeah, I wanna be doing freedom of the press.
Each week, speakers will discuss a different case from the Supreme Court. The first week will explore freedom of the press and discuss the Pentagon Papers from New York Times versus the United States.
So it's about the Vietnam War and the Pentagon Papers, this massive collection of classified documents. They're classified top secret through, I believe, the Truman administration all the way through the Johnson administration, which Secretary McNamara commissioned this study. So the Pentagon was working on it a lot. And then they published about 15 papers of it. It was all from 1945 to 1967 on the war-making efforts in Vietnam and what the real purpose of being in Vietnam was, which also gets partly into my argument. I don't want to give that away yet. But, and they gave 2 copies of the 15 that were published to the Rand Corporation. And this one person who was a military advisor took that and gave it to the Washington Post and to the New York Times, and then they began publishing it. And shortly thereafter, the Nixon administration influenced a circuit court judge to prevent that to order them to stop publishing, and then the whole court battle began. And there were 2 conflicting rulings in the district court, I think in DC, and the second district court, which is in New York. One said you can publish, one said you can't publish, and the Supreme Court took it immediately. I think it was about 13 days that trial lasted.
Breanna will be taking the side of the New York Times, and Travis will represent the U.S. government.
Breanna and I met, and we sat down and we talked about what we wanted to do. And I know she was very passionate about it, and it kind of is a no-brainer. You always side with the freedom of the press. So what we decided to do is we flipped a coin as to who was going to represent what. And I ended up losing. She got the winning side. But I kind of have changed my opinion a little bit about this. Because there is absolutely a necessity for the government to provide that common defense, and in a certain way the press can't hinder that.
The press is one of the few institutional guarantees in the Constitution. It's actually the only one. So freedom of the press is guaranteed to an institution, which is the press, not to a specific person or just kind of generally. So the reason that is done is for the press as an institution to serve as a watchdog for the people. This is a government-made, now I'm going to say it verbatim, but it's fine. For the people, by the people, and of the people. And the press is the same thing. It works as an extension of the people. And does that mean that sometimes information the government doesn't want to get out is going to get out? Yes, but that's the role of the press, to make sure that people are informed. And that's really the argument that I'm going to elaborate upon more than that. But that's really kind of the core part of my argument.
While preparing for the debate, Travis had to overcome the challenge of fighting for the losing side.
Well, I'm debating the losing side, but I'm also debating for a side that I don't agree with. So that's kind of interesting. You have to kind of pull yourself out of it a little bit and make it more, I don't want to say more objective, but you kind of have to just learn how to defend something you don't necessarily agree with. And it's been a pretty difficult, because everything you read online is on the side of the Washington Post and the New York Times. So it's definitely made it a little bit more challenging for that.
While the two are discussing older cases, they plan to include modern factors in their debate.
In the year 2019, the fact that the press has become something that is being called the enemy of the people at this point, I think is really, really disturbing, given that it's supposed to be for the people and of the people. And so I think the fact that we're debating this now is really bringing to light the idea of the fact that we should talk about this, but we should talk about it in a way that's not, slinging mud.
Both Travis and Breanna hope the event can spark a conversation that will help students learn.
So it's really just kind of a chain reaction of thinking and of discussion. And so I'm hoping that by, Travis and myself debating this here, that we can kind of set off that chain reaction of people that are thinking. And, once you think, if you form an opinion, then you can become involved in advocacy and things like that. So, even small steps like this can really spark a change for even one person in their life that becomes involved in something, or it can cause something bigger. So I'm hoping that people just kind of take away the idea of thinking, but also of becoming involved, acting on the opinions that they form from thinking critically about things like this.
Well, I feel like not a lot of people really know about the Supreme Court or about how the arguments work in that, or the history of it, because it is such a foundational part of this country. One ruling can invalidate so many different laws. And it's an incredibly rich and historical institution that is of such importance to this nation. I think one I think they take away is learning about how effective and how the little guy in this case, the Washington Post and New York Times, can win over the big guy. Now, in my case, I don't want them to win. But yeah, it's really interesting to see some of these cases that are going to be argued, whether it's in our debate or the freedom of speech debate or freedom of religion debate. I think it's going to be really, really interesting for everybody to see that.
The first debate will be held in the Academic Media Center studio at 1:30 p.m. Reporting for RMU Century Media, I'm John Blinn.